Hello, my friends. Welcome to your seat at the table. I'm Rick, and I got little gray and white mama sitting over here. She's actually starting to sleep a little bit. Yeah, she's been behaving herself all morning. Yes, she has. So we're looking at Monster Manual for 3.5. Says it right here. Now, not that long ago, one of y'all, my subscribers, said to me in a different video, "Well, that's 3.5 didn't come out till 2005." Now I googled that, and there's some references on Google that says that that's true. But I challenge you when I sit there and say that 3.0 and 3.5 are the same effing thing. There's some slight changes to the 3.5 version, yes. But this book specifically says Core Rulebook 3, version 3.5, Monster Manual for 3.5. And when you look up the publishing date for this, it's 2002. Excuse me, 2003. So this was published 2 years before the 2005 supposed third 3.5 edition. So, no offense, you're wrong. I'm right. Have been for a while. Now, what I'd like to also point out to you is take a look at the book itself. There's a little bit of tape on here, boundary issue. It's been used a lot, right? Even up front here, the cover's a little braille. I need to get some more, I need to get some binders tape. They actually sell a tape for that you can go over books with that's translucent, and that's what I need. I need to get one to go over to cover that up. Part of the reason because as a game master, perhaps there's this misnomer. There's a lot of people make this mistake assuming to be a good game master, you must have the GM guide. No, the GM guide is necessary, is desirable, but not necessarily necessary. You have to have the player handbook and you have to have the monster manual. Whereas the players only need to have the player handbook. So if you have those two books, you can run a game. You can operate a game. The GM guide just gives you a lot of advice and additional options and suggestions. It gives you some additional rule sets, but at the end of the day, the mechanics that you need to really run a campaign are in the player handbook and in the monster manual. They'll make some arguments that that's not true, and there may be some caveats to it. For the lion's share, that is true. I have run plenty of campaigns without having a game master book in my hands because I didn't have access to it at the time. So my most heavily used book out of all of those is the Monster Manual for a number of reasons. Mostly because this is the one we're constantly referring back and forth to. So it talks about introduction, reading the rules, entry statistic block, learning how everything works, giving you a lexicon to start with, etc., etc. Chapter 1, Monsters from A to Z. And once again, there are a slew of these. And at one time or another, I have used just about every single one in here. In part because, you're looking for yet another unique challenge, and in part because you're trying to, with me, I try to have themes. So there was a theme or there was a method to the madness when I introduced them. I didn't try to introduce things just randomly for the sake of randomly using them. But some of this stuff has got some pretty unique characteristics, and it plays well, right? The assassin vine is something I had more than one time. I've had like you have this secluded castle in the forest, and it's supposed to be impossible to get to. And one of the reasons for it is because the jungle, the woodland around it is overgrown and infested with stuff like this, and the big man-eating pod plant and things like that. So you just make uses of them and tap into them. Beholders. Oh, the beholders! I have used beholders as so many foes. They almost became cliche. I stopped. It's ironic. I used to use these pretty heavy when I was younger, when I was a teenager. But as I got older, lesser and lesser, I used them more and more judiciously. Some things are better used sparingly. So when you do use them, they hit with a much harder impact. If you're tossing, certain critters around all the time, your characters get used to, oh, it's just another damn beholder, right? Or one of the various variations of a damn beholder. Blink dogs, bugbears. Can't have a campaign without bugbears. I mean, the bullets. Yeah, used to have some fun with those. Carrion crawlers, creep you out. Centaurs, chaos beasts, right? Just goes through. Then, of course, we got our entry on demons. All kinds of other devil, digester, devour, dinosaurs, of course, the dire animals. I think the most I've ever tapped the dire animals is every now and then I'll get a prestige level or epic level druid when they or a beastmaster, and that's when these guys start to take up because the more advanced those people get, the more they should be able to summon. And if where you could summon a bear. You should at some point you should get to the point where you're going to summon a bear that makes the original bear look like a puppy. So that's where these guys come into place in my use them many times in that aspect to displace your beast. A lot of times, doppelgangers. I love the doppelgangers. True dragons as opposed to the faux dragons. Lots of dragons, lots and lots and lots of dragons. Then we get into elementals. If you're GM'd enough, you're going to use elementals quite prodigiously, and I've used them a lot. The trick is becoming creative. Then we have the entry for an elf because an elf entry is going to be in here, right? Into the drow sub races. That's real Marauder. First time I seen these things, I kept thinking of the Trimmers. You ever seen the Trimmer series? Right? Like, all right, whatever. The Ettins are tough. They're a piece of work. All right, more Morians, more insects, more undead. All right, the cool giant society. Giants make great campaigns for newer players. And later, in more prestige and epic level play, we don't tend to. I don't tend to run large combat encounter campaigns against giants at that point. If you're at that level, most of your characters are going to clean most giants' clocks. I mean, traditional giants, they don't stand a chance. You'd have to epic level them up, to prestige level them up to really keep them on par. But more importantly, I think they open opportunities for other than combat dialogue, other than combat encounters. And intrigue and skullduggery and manipulation and favors and things like this, they start to take a different role at that point. Of course, certain giant tribes are better suited to certain roles than others. You're not going to get a whole lot of palace intrigue in a hill giant fort, as opposed to one of the frost giants, a frost jarl's a court kind of thing, or storm giant court. So it's just a matter of being aware of that situation. Githyanki. Oh, I ran a couple campaigns with Githyanki, and I got the Fiend Folio back in the day, and they're in there, and that's how I became introduced to them. And they were and the Fiend Folio I had came out during first edition, I think, if I remember right. I have it somewhere, and I'll probably eventually get around doing a video on it. I still have it out there, at least I did. Bloody well better still be out there. The goblins and the gnolls and the gnomes. Goblins. Lots of fun with goblins, lots of challenges. Golems, the Gorgon, the Grick, Grimlocks. I had them as a foe in a Underdark. No, not necessarily an Underdark. It was an underground episode. No, three. What was it 4, 5 sessions? They were down there for a while, and they ran into the things. The problem was that they went down and with a limited number of torches, and nobody had the ability to see in the dark. And that's when these guys started to show up, and it became a real interesting challenge. The big part of the challenge was getting back out of the damn ground without the torch, because the last of their torches went out, and it was something else. It was very interesting, right? And I actually don't often do stuff that would be directly impeding the player's ability to do stuff, but for a brief moment in that campaign, when the first uh, or when the last torch went out and they were still quite a ways from the exit, They had no magic, what very few magic items that could produce any light, and it was not like you could like see your, you see 10 feet in front of you with. So what I did was is I asked the players to put blindfolds on. So they all agreed to put blindfolds on, and they played for about a half an hour blind, literally blind. They couldn't see the table, they couldn't see their characters. And my reasoning behind that was, and I've said this before in other videos, as when Brenda and I, my current wife out here, Brenda and I got married, we went on our honeymoon. We ended up in the uh, caverns down in Missouri. Oh geez, I know. Come on, what's his name? I know his name. Anyhow, we went down in the caverns, and God damn it, what's his name? I know his name. Your old Huckleberry Fannencraft, for God's sake. Anyway, he's got caverns down there named after him in the town of Hannibal, Missouri, I believe. And the caverns themselves, we were there the weekend before Memorial Day weekend or Labor Day weekend. And so they were just opening up, and there was several busloads of elementary school kids on a damn excursion. They're minders. The poor lady that was the poor park ranger lady that took us all down there, and my wife and I. And she says, "You really don't understand just how dark it can be underground until you're down here and you have no lights." And she flipped the lights off, and the entire cavern system went black. And it was so black, so pitch black, you could literally put your hand in front of your face and smack yourself in the nose, and you wouldn't see your hand coming because you absolutely cannot see nothing. And of course, you add that to the what was a 60 or so screaming 12-year-olds. It just made it for a memorable experience. So as I played to my players at that time, I says, put some blindfolds. I want you to blindfold yourselves for the next half hour and play your characters that way. And it gave them that full on immersion experience of what it would be like to be utterly blind in that scenario. And how do you handle even the most mundane things, trying to get out of there without cracking your skull, without getting lost, trying to remember your path. How much do you successfully, how well do you retain that info, and how do you deal with it? And they got out of it. There was some complaining. There was some complaining about it wasn't fair, blah blah blah. But then they rose to the challenge. That was the important part. The players rose to the challenge, and they found creative ways. One of them had been keeping a crude map, so they had a crude map to work from. The problem was they couldn't see it, and the another player would use their flint and tinder to try to strike. They were trying to get a flame going, but they were unsuccessful because they didn't have any burning. They didn't really have enough material with them to burn unless they wanted to start burning their personal stuff, and they weren't really inclined to do that. They didn't bring, once the torches was out, they didn't have oil, they didn't have this, they didn't have that. It was part of those. We didn't pay attention to our logistics. We didn't care to, our accounting was off or not, and they paid for it. And so the one character would keep sparking the damn flint and tinder so they could get just enough of a visual to look at that map so they could make a choice decision. Should they go left? Should they go right? And this worked until they get within a couple hundred feet of the exit. And then they were doing this, and I'm rolling dice on the side, and I rolled a one, and I said, your map catches on fire. Your map catches on fire, and while the map wasn't very big, it was somewhat robust, and the characters start to panic, and one of them's like, "Well, put it out, I'll put it out," and another one says, "No, it's a light." And they used the last of that burning that map as it burned itself up to sprint down the hallway. While they're reading the map while it's on fire and sprinting for the exit, and they the map falls apart just before they get to the corner that shows the light to the exit. So they lose the damn map, and they're in the darkness again. And then while they're talking, somebody I had somebody do a perception check. I think it was perception, and I said you can smell the air. The air smells fresher. There's uh, a hint of moisture in the air that wasn't there before, and more importantly, it appears the darkness is a little lighter, that you can actually see some motion and some short and some movement, things like that in there. So let's just play that stuff out. Half dragons, half fiends. Uh, Always over the decades, there's always the player who wants to go exotic and they want to have a half this and half that. And having the means of being able to give them templates and ideas on how to set it up just makes that so much simpler and easier. Halflings, of course, which are well established, the harpies, hellhounds, hobgoblins and hippogriffs. It sounds like a bar. Humongous and howlers and hydras, and the inevitable, and my friend the kobolds, visible stalkers, krakens, katoa. Some of these I never used because they were I just could never justify using them. Some of these are suited for terrain. So certain things are better suited for like a desert environment. And so when you're going to have that kind of campaign, you want to gear it towards that kind of campaign. So do your due diligence, do your homework. If you're going to be a game master and you're going to set up your own sandbox and your players go off into a certain ecology, try to populate that ecology appropriately. So if they're adventuring in a swamp, you should not find, ocean based critters or desert based whatever in a swamp. Just saying, you shouldn't allow. So when you people like that's one of the things people don't like about random encounters because it doesn't make sense, and just have something randomly pop up. And then I've always make my caveat argument is no, that makes perfectly good sense as long as right. It's like there was one game set that we had going where these very exotic creatures would just show up out of nowhere and attack the players. And the players at beginning got irate about it. They're like, "Well, this isn't normal for you. We don't just have random blah. This doesn't even belong in this place. What is this thing?" And it took them a while, and I just kind of smiled and said, "Yeah, well, figure it out." Eventually, they figured it out. They had, in previous several sessions earlier, they had double crossed or unintentionally double crossed a powerful wizard who wanted these people to pay. And so this wizard was kept scrying them and finding out where their location was, and it would drop a gate and just summon something, magically summon something from some other place that doesn't belong there and throw it at them. The absurdity came at him, I think, when I dropped, what was it? I dropped something that was totally unsuited for the environment. It did not last long, but they were just so flummoxed by it. They said, "This is not something is very off." And as players, I said, your characters have to figure that out. You're as players, you're fishing from me. You're trying to pressure me into justifying why I'm doing what I'm doing because I don't normally do that sort of stuff. Think about it. Use your head. So we get giant dire werebores and where other things, nasty stuff. Camps has characters. I have done a couple campaigns that were dominated by uh, shapeshifter, and that can be a challenge. It can be fun as all get out. It can also be a real challenge, and it can be mature. Just face the facts, Reds. If you're going to play a werewolf character, you have to have a mature audience because if your werewolf is to actually do a werewolfy things, they're going to be bloodthirsty in the wrong elements, the right elements. They're also going to be brutal and violent and gross. It will. This is where that mature audience thing is appropriate for them. Some things should not be played in front of kids, or at least not played to their effects. Right? The Medusas. I've used Medusas sparingly. These things are such a trip and such a trick to master. There's something interesting about the Medusas, though. The Medusas have a male compadre, and I can't remember the name off the top of my head. I don't see it entered in here off the top of my head. Yeah, I don't see. I won't spend too much time Yeah. See, it was always implied that Medusas were female, but at some point a male version was introduced. And the male version is known for its extreme devotion to the female Medusa that it's partnered with, to the point where if it witnesses you killing its partner, it will spend the rest of its entirety existence hunting you down and killing you. That will become its ultimate goal in life. And that can be another one of those interesting things that just pop up every now and then to cause a problem. Miffids. I've used Miffids off and on. They were, you know, kind of like they're a different variation on the weirds, but, merfolk, the mind flares, mimics, minotaurs, minotaurs as characters. I had one player who was huge on playing the big behemoths, and he would often want to play minotaurs or half minotaurs, and I'm like, yeah, okay, just remember that you're not going to be well received in town. And then players sometimes get upset. That's one of those challenges as a GM that they don't talk about. So you get a player who insists on playing something that is extremely unsuitable for civilized society, i.e., the Minotaur, for example. Minotaurs are notoriously dangerous for good reasons. So having one as a character is a challenge for not just the player, but everybody else around it. So all the NPCs are going to be challenged by a Minotaur walking into town wearing an outfit and acting like he's a sophisticated trader. I mean, can you tell me where I can find your vintage wine store, please? They don't know what to do, and most of them are terrified by the thing, and you need to play it that way. You know, that Minotaur character would be challenged at almost every gate, every village, every town. If a village was small, most of the town people would flee. They would literally panic and run. If the town was large enough, then there would be security. The guards would not want this thing in. They would have to make very strong arguments to be allowed to allow that character to enter town. It became the player became upset by that because he said, "Well, you're doing that on purpose." And I said, "No, you chose to play something that most people see as a monster, and a flesh-eating one at that, a brutal one. So you can't expect that everybody to see you as something as you see yourself, because that's not how the Minotaur is portrayed. It's your job to convince them you're not the Minotaur that they're afraid of. And once that character, not all players can come to grips with that. They expect you to cater too much to their whim, too much to their player agency. And player agency is fine and dandy, but there are limits to it. And there's a hubris and an arrogance in a lot of players today who make that argument that I can do this and I can do that. You're the GM. You don't get to make this decision. You don't get to you can't make that decision. No, I'm the game master, and this is my table, and I choose to play it this way, and this is how I choose to run it. And I'm sorry that it offends you. So you can either get on board with how I run this stuff, or thank you for coming. There's the door. It's hard to do that. It's really hard to do that, especially when it's so hard to get players in the first place. You just not in an area. I don't have players falling all over myself, and part of me is I've become socially inept in a lot of ways in the public. It's hard for me to want to go to a game store and just sit down at the table and wait and hope and pray somebody takes pity on me or becomes interested in what I'm doing. And I'm not robustly outgoing enough to promote it myself. And part of it's that, and the other part of it's got to do with timing and having the time to devote properly to gaming the way I would want to do it. Which is why I'm such a big fan of play-by-post, but I can't get anybody to do it, and I can't find a decent play-by-post website. D&D Beyond was great, but I won't go back to using it. So that means I'm not playing. The Nymph, right? Oh, I love this character. I love these guys, and so many people hate them. So and a lot of them ignore them. There's once again, we talk about levels of maturity and adult play, and this sort of thing is probably better for high level maturity mindset or an adult theme. What I mean that is, if you play it as the character's meant to be played, there's a bunch of sexual undertones in it, and that's by intent. So no, you don't want your teenage kids playing it. No, you don't want your elementary age kids playing at those tables. But when you got a bunch of 30-year-old, 30 plus somethings at the table that have been well jaded in the world and the way things are, unless you're a purist or you're religiously, you have a religious or personal bias against something like that, and you better establish that in session zero. If we've established that we're running a mature campaign or a adults only campaign, don't come bitching and crying at me if I start throwing things like this at you to taunt you and tempt you and to toy with you, because that's what they're for. Fool. It's what they're for. You don't have to like it and you choose not to use it, that's on you. But and in later versions, that's one of the controversies about the current Wizards of the Coast alterations for their latest version of Dungeons and Dragons, is they're trying to literally, I don't know what else to use. I don't like this term woke. I don't. I think it's inappropriate and poorly utilized, and they've turned it into something that's not what it is. And by definition, we all are awake. We all should be awake to the realities around us, even though many of us choose to walk through the world with rose-colored glasses or with a blindfold on. Literally, that's neither here nor there. So just make sure that that's understandable. And so in later, like I said, later version, they start removing things. They've taken the succubus out altogether, because of the sexual undertones that creature is what it is. It's called a succubus for a reason. Hello. I did have one player in a D&D campaign who was quite well playing quite, he was playing real good, but he personally absolutely could not cope or could not handle that seductress mindset when it came to the succubus that was inhabiting the little figurine that was the MacGuffin for the party to try to get rid of. He actually became irate because he's like, I don't want to play like that, and I'm like, I'm sorry that you don't want to play that way, but do I need to here? Let me cut and paste the opening caveats for this campaign. Did you not read this? Did you not understand that this is an adult theme, that we are going to have adult subject matter that comes up? We're going to use stuff that are not suitable for children. You agreed to this when you chose to sit down at the table and play the virtual table at the Playway Post. Well, I just didn't think. I said, okay, fine. Good luck. Good luck. And his character suffered an accident, fell overboard. Boom bomb. Situation solved. Sad because he was a really good player. And at that point, I mean, I got he was getting upset, and I finally got upset back. And I said, "Look, I'm sorry, but this is the goal. This is part of it. You can't deal with that. You shouldn't have been playing in the first place." And I was very clear at the beginning that this sort of stuff was going to go on. You chose to be a quote retired paladin. Who the hell do you think that succubus is going to try to screw with the most? Because you're a perfect target. And if you couldn't cope with that, you made those choices, not me. You also agreed to play at this level of play. So, yeah. Yeah, I can be a prick when I need to be. Don't call me Rick for nothing. Ochre jelly, the orcs, owls and giant owls and owl bears and phantom fungus, plain touched, the initial introduction of the tiefling. Why do you suppose so many players become attached to tiefling? Because of the maturity level, the seduction level, the sex that it implies. Even if it's not played out, it's still there. I find that quite interesting that of the two, the plain touch that are listed here, the Asimir and the Tiefling. The Asimir is actually a goodly character. It is considered usually good of any class, as opposed to the Tiefling being an evil character, usually of any class. The Tiefling, being an evil character, ironically, is the far more popular of the playable here than this one. You never hear anybody playing an Asimir. You always hear people, I want to be a tiefling. I want to play a tiefling. I'm going to be a tiefling. Just saying. Why did they choose the tiefling? All right. Why? Rakasha. Rakashas are another challenge for a number of reasons. And I have used them as some big bads, and I've used them for some just random stuff. And I have never had anybody try to play one as a character. I have attempted myself once, but the campaign I was playing in it only lasted for about 4 weeks, and then the guy running the show decided he didn't want to play it. He didn't want to run the show anymore. Then once again, I become the DM because nobody else wanted to do it. Roper, rocks, rust monsters, Thaglins. There was one campaign where a couple of the characters encountered one of these things and they managed to trap it. And the wizard put it in a jar or something. I don't remember. He got it captured in a way that they were able to, basically keep it. And then many sessions later, I forget where they were. They were at there was some big group of well armored knights involved, and the players turned this thing loose in the knight's hall, and it was some the chaos that ensued after it was funny, because there was nothing like watching 20 or 30 grown ass men in armor freaking out and running and trying to get out of the room at the same time as this thing just keeps landing onto their stuff and turning it to dust. It was just something else. Salamanders, Satar, Shadow Masters, Shambling Skeletons, who, everybody's tossed the skeletons for more salads, you know, right? Specters, sprites, sturges, swarms, various types of swarms. I've used these numerous times over the years. It just kind of rolls into rasks. One of the most impervious, hardest to kill things out there, these damn things. And for the most part, you're meant to see these from a distance and run the hell away. And I've told the story numerous times. There was a character named Tornay. She was a lizard girl, and their party. She was more of a troublemaker. She was always trying to run off with watermelons and and other stuff. If you gave her a gemstone, she more likely used it as ammo, pretty sparkly ammo for her sling. So they learned to stop giving her gemstones. In her case, giving her any kind of real treasure was pointless because she had no appreciation for it. And she did, and she just saw food. She saw food. She figured it was for everybody. She didn't understand the concept that you might have to pay a vendor for it first, and so the party had to deal with that on a regular basis. She was also fearless warrior, and to the point of being foolhardy. And the party got into a big, huge fight with one of these things, and one of the tanks got swallowed whole. And it was through that person's effort at carving itself out from the inside out that they actually killed the thing. Because from the exterior, it's damn near impervious. But in the process of this thing getting, literally carved up from the inside out, Torny managed to get on this thing and run all the way up its back and get on the back of its head, and stabbed it, broke the stone point off of her spear, but stabbed it in the back of the head. Right as the player inside gutted it and finished it off, so the thing collapsed. And Torny took the credit for it, because she's the most fearless warrior, of course, and she killed the big ugly uh, terror thing or whatever the hell it was. Or something else. Now we got Trents and Tritons, Troglodytes, more lizard people. The Umber Hulk. Once again, this is one of the better artistic versions of an Unger Hulk I've seen. Some of the earlier ones, and they look like a walking beetle. I wasn't impressed by them. So let's see, what is this? Sanders World like to a trade world in charge. How many systems? Oh, this is this is some of my notes. How many systems are in a Golgar cluster? Universal seed, predicted efforts. You can color this. That's a different kind of stuff. Oh, that was okay. I retasked this. I was using this at one point to, yeah, yeah. That's not. You guys don't want to see that. pointless piece of stuff. Vampires and vampire spawns. I had Ravensloft, the box set, and I ran Ravensloft quite a few times. It was one of the items I gave to my older son, which I now wish I hadn't done. Uh, but vampires, of course, was a big theme there, and I've used them as big bads over the decades too in various campaigns. Usually, I like vampires as a mid-level, so that the players are dealing with local problems, and then this expands into something more deeper and bigger and broader, and then eventually they run up against the vampires themselves and have to deal with it. Wights and will-o-wisps and winter wolves and wargs and wraiths and oh my, right? Just goes down through the list. Anyhow, I suspect if you played any kind of D&D, you have one of these things, or you have some variation thereof. Beautiful book, heavily used, well used. I really need to get some binding tape and get this thing taped up better because I don't want the cover to come off, and I'm not likely to bind it unless I stumble across a replacement at JCD and their bargain book bin, which is extremely unlikely. Uh, I want to keep this as long as I can. I have high hopes eventually someday when I quote, assuming I can ever actually retire. I hit the age where I just can't physically do my job anymore. At that point, I'll go pick a day a week and go sit at one of these game stores in their room, look pathetic until somebody takes pity on me. Right. Anyway, till next time, I'm Rick. Praying White Mom over here. Hope you have yourself